Hey guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Today, we have a very special episode for you guys because it is the very first review of a Sultan Pasha attar on my channel. And so I have to say thank you to Sultan Pasha for sending me a couple of these to play with and get to know. And actually, it's funny. So I am a very happy Ram today because I'm getting to talk about this brand. But on the other hand, I am a Ram that is in complete trepidation on the inside because I have no idea how I'm going to talk about a fragrance like this. And basically, this is an attar, okay? And I've reviewed a couple attars on the channel, but very few, okay? And usually, I am not an attar guy, okay? I must admit. When it comes to my personal preference in wearing fragrances, I much prefer to spray, mostly because I am a very routine person. If it's in the routine, it's in the routine. Like as soon as I'm done with this, I'm going to go work out. It's in the routine, right? Once it's taken out of the routine, it's very easy to keep it out of the routine for me. And so that's why I really have to be careful with what I make a routine. And so for me, spraying my daily fragrance is a routine that has gone on for, the last decade or whatever it may be. And I love to spray. I have a ritual with where I spray. I'll usually spray inside of my collarbone right here first. And then as the day goes on, maybe I'll put some here or on the back of the neck and on the top of the hand so I can kind of smell it and break it down. Can't spray these attars, okay? And the whole thing about the attar is that it is pure fragrance oil, basically. And so one of the reasons why I started the video by saying I am such a grateful Ram today to be doing this video is many times you hear people complaining in the fragrance community. It's very easy to complain. It's also very easy to point and laugh at somebody. Oh, that person likes Stronger With You by, which I've never smelled, by the way, but I just know it's shite. But let's say that person likes Stronger With You, or that person likes this new Carolina Herrera Bad Boy Le Parfum, or whatever other shite fragrance that I just would despise, right? And it's very easy to point a finger at those companies and say they're using too many amber woods, they're using too much ambroxan, they're using too much this, or they're, what happened to the natural rose, which it's definitely in here. The natural rose in here is absolutely mind-boggling, as is the jasmine. Like right now, it's about 5 hours in, and I'm starting to get some smoky smelling patchouli with a little bit of this hyraceum and tobacco in the base. But most of the first 5 hours is just beautiful rose and jasmine. And it's this floral tea-like smell. It's absolutely amazing. It's very hard to describe. The reason that I say I'm a Ram that is, I have an inner storm brewing inside of me. Because on one hand, I'm so excited to basically be talking about a potential replacement or a potential solution for all of the woes, right? And there are some houses that have made an appearance on my channel, like Russian Adam, Arise Ladore, Bortnikov, those type of fragrance houses, Ensar Oud, where I think they are solving for some of those issues, if you will. You know what's funny? It always kind of strikes me a little bit strange when I hear someone say, somebody like, Sultan Pasha or Ensar Oud or Arise, or Russian Adam, for example, from Arise Ladore, that they let the materials do the talking. That they're not, professionally trained perfumer, they can't blend, and there are some different ways that these type of perfumes are made. Russian Adam talked about the distillation process and how it's blended in when he did his history of Attar, history of Indian Attar collection. And so one thing that is always interesting to me is when you have some of these fragrances that are using real rose, which is heavily, heavily restricted now in IFRA, okay? Because rose can actually cause a rash. Or let's say they're using real deer musk, which this has real deer musk in it. Or let's say they're using real ambergris, which is extremely expensive. It can still be used in the fine French perfumery, but it's very expensive, right? So many times it's substituted with a synthetic substitute. That's where ambroxan originally came from. It wasn't meant to be used like it's used today. And so whenever you have a fragrance like that, and they're using these real ingredients. It's always interesting that, you know, the perfumers who are of these other houses, the Thierry Vassars of Guerlain, the Olivier Polges of Chanel, they're trying to recreate the smell of the real deer musk and stuff like this with the musk they're using. Or they're trying to create the real rose that you're smelling in these type of perfumes from the artisanal houses using the synthetic molecules that are available to them, because it's just too, number one, they're not allowed, if they want to sell within IFRA, to use, I think it's more than 4% of rose oil in a composition. And so I don't know percentages in here. I have no clue about any of that, but all I can tell you is this. This fragrance is, I feel like no matter how much time I spend with it, I will not be able to give it its fair due. So take that with a grain of salt. These Attars reviews that I'm going to do from Sultan Pasha are going to be sort of me just rambling, because I honestly don't know what to say about many of these. I am completely stumped, honestly, and I spend most of my days with perfume and thinking about perfume and breaking down perfume, and these have completely stumped me because they are so polar opposite to fine French perfumery. So the fragrance we're going to talk about today, it is written on the bottle, but it's actually really hard to see. So I don't know if you can see that. You probably can, but you have no idea what it says. That right there says Sultan Pasha. If that gives you any idea. This right here says Shirin Chai. Excuse me. Shirin. Shirin Chai. And so Shirin Chai basically translates to sweet Persian tea, if you will. Okay. So sweet Persian tea is the name of this fragrance. And from Persian to English, that's the translation. Okay. And so this is Sultan Pasha's interpretation of sweet Persian tea, if you will. One thing that I wish he did more of, and I'm nobody to tell him how to run his business, but I wish he gave more information on the fragrance, because if you go watch some of, you know, my interviews with Russian Adam, this came up on one of them. I can't remember which one, but on one of the 4 or 5 interviews that I did, we were going through and smelling some ingredients, and we were smelling some of these actual rose oils. So we were smelling like the Indian red rose and stuff like that. And it came to a point where, you know, we were smelling stuff, and I was asking him to describe it to me, and he says, oh, okay, this particular rose, it feels like, to me, there's like a note of pear at the top. And I said, okay, yeah, I get that. I kind of get apricot or whatever it is, but whenever he would say something as I'm smelling it, it's almost like the nose smells it. You know, it's almost like the nose is hearing what he's saying, and you can almost smell right along with him. And sometimes people need a little bit of a blurb to point them in the right direction, especially with something as complex as this. I've been wearing this as my scent of the day today. I've worn it to bed 4 times. Okay, so this is the 5th time I've worn this. I've just kind of focused on this one, and I'll tell you why. He sent me a couple others. This one's called Ensar Rose. This is a special rose. This is another amazing rose fragrance. I've tested these other ones as well. This one is called Hareem, I believe, Hareem, and he sent me this one as well, which is called, I forget what this one's called, Faghia. I'll look them up later and put them in the description. But he also sent me a ton of tiny, you know, little, just enough to maybe do a quick video on, like 20 others. He sent me a lot, 20 or 30 others. He sent me a lot of juice, but in Attars, you have to remember that. So I think this is about 1 ml of what he sent me. And I've been wearing this, like I said, I wore it to bed. I've been wearing it all day. And so 1 ml of this is $109.57 on his website. 3 mils is $311.27. 6 mils is $560.29. And the biggest bottle he says sells is 12 mils, which is $933.81. So he has it down to a science. What's interesting is each fragrance is a different cost, because each fragrance uses different ingredients, if you will, right? So the note listing on this, which I will tell you, but it will mean absolutely nothing to you, because it in no way describes the way that the fragrance smells. But it's Persian Rose Otto. I guess there are some hints. Persian Rose Otto, frankincense, saffron, cardamom, lemon, and mint in the top. Middle of Amber Rose Centrifolia Absolute. So it's the Absolute that he's using in the heart. Edwardian Rose Absolute, which, to be quite frank, I think that's also known as Bourbon Rose Absolute, but I'm not 100% sure. I think Edwardian Rose Absolute and Bourbon Rose Absolute are basically the same thing. Jasmine Grandiflorum Absolute, Jasmine Sambac Absolute, and honey in the heart, with a base of black tea, beeswax, tobacco, sandalwood, Mysore sandalwood is what he says, Gaiac wood, and I trust him on this one. I'm not thinking he's one of the houses that's just using that as an accord. I bet you there's actual Mysore sandalwood in this. Benzoin, vetiver, hyraceum, white ambergris, deer musk accord. So I don't know if it's actual deer musk or not. Cedarwood, aged patchouli, okay? So I'm on hour 5 right here, okay? And I actually started here, okay? I just put a little bit right here this morning, and I went to here. So I have a later dry down here. This is about a 10-hour dry down right here because it's almost 8 o'clock in the evening. And I put this on 5 hours ago, okay? So I'm 5 hours in. And now I'm getting some of these tobacco, this slightly smoky hyraceum. Hyraceum is kind of like African stone. So it's actually it's a type of literal poop from a rodent in the desert that it almost like mummifies, and they use it as, it can be extremely hard to work with. Here, he was so careful on the hyraceum because in the beginning, you might almost look and say, I don't smell any. I mean, and I say the beginning, like the first 4 hours, the animalic side is very, very low. But as it continues to dry into the base, you get some of that ambergris, that sparkle of ambergris with the animalic hyraceum. But this fragrance is more, for the beginning 4 to 5 hours, it's about the florals, okay? And the florals in this are absolutely beautiful. The other thing I should mention, like I said, the depth and complexity of this fragrance. I've been sitting on these fragrances like a cactus for the last, 4 months or however long he sent these to me. And I say like a cactus because I've been wanting to jump off, press record, and do these videos for you guys. But part of me is like, how do I describe an attar like this? And I will tell you that I have had some Attars that I've talked about on the channel, and I have more. I will talk about more on the channel. They're just not my favorite. So these right here are Henri Jacques samples. These are very expensive and hard to find. Here's H.J. Fabian Absolute. Here is Henri Jacques Cuba. Here is Henri Jacques Berco de Majoy. I think that's what that says. And so I've done a video, maybe just one video on an Henri Jacques fragrance, and I thought it was drastically overpriced, right? And I've been testing this Amouage Attar, which I think is discontinued, but I'm going to talk about it on the channel for you guys. This is called Al Shamouk. And beautiful musk note in that as well. And, that's another one that I like it, but there's no way I would pay. I think that's discontinued now anyways, but even the current Amouage Attars from what I have, had a chance to hear of people talking about them, they're not worth it. And I kind of feel very similar about what I've been smelling in some of these other Attars. And so Attars are one of these things where I'm like, it ruins my, my routine. I can't get to spray. That's why I can't wait for the sprayable versions of Sultan Pasha's stuff. But from the Attars that I've smelled, Sultan Pasha, I've tested all 4 of these so far. There'll be some videos on these coming up. But Sultan Pasha is the Mozart of Attar making. Like, if you had unlimited funds, honestly, unlimited funds, okay? And let's say you love Attars. See, Attars, when I think of Attars, I think of the nomadic Bedouin sitting on a camel riding through the desert. That's just what I think about. And I just think about the sand just blasting this guy as he's riding through the desert. And I think about him getting off his camel, stopping and going into his fellow Bedouin's tent and having some coffee and goat milk and all of the other stuff, right? And I'm from Jordan, so I can say this. I can say this about my fellow Bedouin brothers. But I just imagine being in the elements, being in the desert, you know, a perfume of alcohol content would just fly off of your skin. It would just evaporate. The heat in the desert would just kill it, right? And so these Attars, the way I think about them is that they're just meant to affix to the skin and just last for 20 hours, right? Just last. You don't have to worry about reapplying. You don't have to worry about, you don't have to worry about sillage or anything like that, because they are just pure fragrance oils. Now, there are pros and cons to that. The number one pro is that this thing is going to last on your skin forever. These Attars are an all-day affair. Like, if you don't want to smell this, if you're somebody who has a fragrance in the morning, a fragrance of the afternoon, and a fragrance at night, this will kill your routine, because this is going to last all day. The 10-hour swipe that I made 10 hours ago, I can still smell the dry down right now. I can still smell the dry down. This 5-hour one, clear as day. Absolutely clear as day. I can still smell it. And it's brilliant. It's beautiful. And so the one thing to keep in mind with Attars is that they are going to wear completely different. It's like speaking two different languages to what I'm used to talking about. That's one of the reasons I've been so hesitant about making these. And they wear different. They develop different, okay? And so I'm no Attar master, like I said, but I'm gonna give this a shot, if you will, okay? So Sultan Pasha, to me, he is the master of Attars from what I've smelled. And if you are an Attar guy, these are the ones that I would focus on. So here's the thing. So I decided to start off by trying to discuss Shirin Chai, because I looked at the juice and I went, this is the darkest of the four that he sent me. Let's go with the dark one, okay? Let's go with the dark one. But as it turns out, it's a little bit of a trick, because even though this is the darkest juice, it wears the lightest out of all of them. It honestly wears the lightest to me. This is an extremely smooth, laid back, okay, relaxing fragrance. This is an extreme zen scent to me, because what you end up smelling, to my nose, the way that this fragrance develops, is it opens up with a lot of fresh rose, almost like smelling fresh rose petals. The rose in here is almost lemony, very tea-like, okay? There's a lot of tea-like notes in this rose, and obviously with a name like Shirin Chai being a tea-type fragrance, you would expect that, but it doesn't open up necessarily smelling like tea. It opens up smelling like a beautiful, bright rose otto. Rose otto basically just means like essential oil, not an absolute, which is, distilled using some sort of ethanol or something like that, and the heavier molecules are then redistilled. Not an absolute. This is the pure rose otto. So imagine this very fresh type rose, and it's complemented with other fresh notes. So there is a frankincense at the top, but it's not a super smoky frankincense. In fact, it's almost like a lemony resinoid. Okay, it smells like a resinoid, like frankincense when you first apply. And you will get a lot of the cardamom in the beginning, so it almost makes it smell like a spicy fresh rose, if that makes sense. The mint plays a very minimal role, so don't think you're going to get like toothbrush like accord, toothpaste like accord, not at all. But what you immediately notice, the very first thing that I noticed the first time I ever smelled this, is just how unbelievably smooth it smells. And I reviewed a very expensive rose fragrance. I think it was $350 or so, $320 for 30 mils from the house of Katana, which is an up-and-coming artisanal house. Although I to be fair, I sprayed it on the inside of my elbow when I was testing it, and I sprayed my wrist, and I sprayed Malik Al Taif over here. Malik Al Taif absolutely destroyed Katana's Khan. Katana's Khan felt like a child compared to it. It was still beautiful in the first hour. You can go check out my review on that, but it did not hold a candle to Malik Al Taif. And so this fragrance is in that beautiful rose category when it first opens up. And it opens up so smooth and so relaxing. You know what it's like? I made some notes here. It's like you're sitting in your favorite lazy boy chair, okay? You're leaned back. Your feet are kicked up. The dog is by your feet, The fireplace is on. The remote's right here. You don't even have to get up, right? The remote's already right here. The newspaper's on the table, okay? For those of you who still know what a newspaper is. And you've got your slippers, right? And if you don't, the dog brings it to you. He brings you your slippers. You've got your pipe or whatever you've got your nice glass of $300 a glass scotch or whatever you like. And everything's perfect, you know? Your significant other, whoever she may be, she comes and brings you your tea, and it's still steaming hot, and it's sitting on the table, right? And the steam is just, you know, maybe it's cold outside, and you're just sitting in your perfect chair. There's just this serenity. The world is perfect in that moment, right? And that's what it feels like when you first spray this, or first swipe it. There's just this the smoothness of it is mind-blowing. It is so unbelievably smooth. And the tea note that begins to come through almost will remind you of like a Ceylon tea. And just imagine, instead of Ceylon tea, instead of putting like sugar cubes on the side, you just say screw it, put the sugar cubes in there instantly and just let them melt. Maybe even you put a little bit of like half and half or cream in there, right? There's a little something slightly sweet. Parfumo calls this a gourmand floral, which I disagree with that assessment. Even though this is a tea fragrance, I don't think it's a gourmand fragrance. Not in any sense of the word, like you would expect to hear a gourmand, right? Not in the sense of a word like you're expecting some of these gourmands that smell like, you know, pancakes, and it's nothing like that, okay? It's not that type of gourmand. There is just something slightly sweetened about it, right? And so one of the problems with Attars is in describing the Attar. Like I said, it's extremely hard to describe an Attar. I almost feel like I'm a man who's blind, and I'm in a room, and I'm trying to find my way, and there are plaques on the wall with Braille, but I'm struggling to get to the next plaque, if that makes sense. I read the plaque, once I get to the plaque, and I feel the Braille, I can see all the beautiful texture, you know? I can feel it perfectly. I can understand the writing. I can read it. I can read it's telling me to go to the next plaque. But then as I move to the next plaque, I'm like a blind man trying to find my way to the next plaque. And that's how it feels trying to break this fragrance down, because normally fragrances nowadays, especially in the last decade or so, or maybe even 15 years, there's been this trend that has accelerated where the fragrance houses make it almost a point to make sure you can easily pick out each and every note. That's not how it used to be back in the day. Even these old vintage scents like opium and stuff like that, they didn't have this, oh, you can pick out bergamot, then you can pick out the geranium, and then you can pick out the rose, and then you can pick out the nutmeg, and then you can pick out the sandalwood. It did not work that way. You know, it was like a big giant blend, like a big complex ball. And everything just seemed more, it didn't seem like they put as much air and space between the notes, right? And I was talking with my good friends, me and Rich Mitch and Jonathan have a group chat in WhatsApp called the Vintage Brothers. And that's what the group chat is named. I hope you guys don't mind me sharing this, because it was a great analogy. And Rich Mitch said that Attars feel like they're so tightly wound that you know, you can't actually, there are some modern fragrances that feel like you can just stand up and walk around in and see, okay, here's the myrrh, here's the lemon over here, you know, and you can just see, you can almost stand up and there's breathable room between the notes. And I thought it was a great analogy. And Jonathan took it a step further. He said it's like being on an airplane and you're flying over the land and you can see everything down below. And you have this bird's eye view. That's like when you're smelling fine French perfumery, right? This is Guerlain Heritage, one of my favorite masculines of all time. Oh, it's fantastic. It is. I'm going to do a Hall of Fame review on this very, very soon. Maybe even tomorrow. But I want to do one soon because I absolutely adore Heritage. I think it's one of the greatest Guerlains of all time. And not just men or women, but of all time. It's one of my all-time favorites. There's 26 notes in this fragrance, okay? It is an absolute I mean, I think it's a masterpiece. I think it's Jean-Paul Guerlain's masculine masterpiece, in my opinion. If you said, Ramsey, pick one Jean-Paul Guerlain fragrance to wear, I would pick that over Vetiver and Abbey Rouge, although Abbey Rouge would probably come second and Vetiver would come third. And then we would go from there and start arguing. But you know, the thing about these type of fragrances, maybe this was not the best example, but it still works because this fragrance takes you on this particular type of journey. It wears a certain way. The notes feel a certain way. You know, there's a top, a middle, a base. It truly is fine French perfumery to me. This is fine French perfumery, okay? And the Attars, it's not like being on the airplane where you have a bird's eye view and you can look down and see everything. Jonathan said it was like being on a train and traveling the countryside by train. So you're much closer to the ground. You're much closer to that field of roses, right? Or whatever the note may be. You're much closer to the vetiver being grown right there in the ground, right? But you're seeing a much smaller, it's like a horse with blinders on, right? So what I've noticed while wearing these Attars is the great detail that you can make out in the particular point in time of where the attar is in its life cycle. And one of the hardest things about breaking an attar down is the life cycle is this long. I mean, it is huge. It's 20 hours potentially. So it's not like, you know, many times I've gotten to a point with some of these fragrances where you could grab one, spray it and go, that's what this is. It's almost like you could just break it down. You get to a point in this hobby where you've smelled so much and very little surprises you anymore. But the thing about this is, it's like taking a microscope. It's like taking a flower and taking a microscope and zooming into that flower and seeing every little detail in full bloom. You know, the opening note in this is a Persian Rose Otto. Okay, you may have remembered that from 27 minutes ago when I started rambling. Persian Rose Otto was the very first note in this, right? And apparently the Persian rose is supposed to be a slightly resinous rose that feels a little bit like myrrh, okay? So imagine taking this very natural smelling rose, and it's the Otto, right? So the way that this basically opens up on my skin is it opens up just feeling extremely chill and calm, but in such a natural sense, and you're zooming in on that Persian rose Otto in the beginning. And, you know, whenever the next note's time is to shine, right? So let's say you move on from the Persian rose and and it's all this tightly wound ball, right? So you're smelling something, but you're just getting a little piece of it. It's like it's like that the notes work together to keep you out, you know, like they're working in tandem. They're so tightly wrapped, they're working in tandem. And but everything gets a chance to shine. That's the craziest thing about it. Is truly everything gets a chance to shine. It's so smooth and mellow. It's such a mellow and smooth blend. And so along with the rose, the fresh rose, you get the frankincense, which again feels very lemony. And what ends up happening though is the depth and the intricacy of each note just is mind-boggling. It really is mind-boggling. That's why I say I think Sultan Pasha, I haven't felt this way about the other Attars that I've tried. I like the Amouage Attar. I'm not gonna lie, I really did like this. Would I buy it? No, I would not. Would I buy any of these Henri Jacques? I don't think I would. I'm gonna do videos on them if God willing, I'll do videos on them. But Sultan Pasha's work is special, even though this is not my preferred type of style. Like I want it to be heavier and richer, but just the beauty of it. It's like looking at a painting and it's not your favorite type of art, but you can really admire what the artist was going for, right? I think this is very similar in taste to me, because what ends up happening is, so once that fragrance catches you, once that particular note catches your attention, what's so crazy about it, the way I describe Sultan Pasha's Attars is it's like, you know, imagine here we are on Earth, right? And, you know, we know so much about the universe, yet we know so little, right? But just imagine how big the universe is. Just imagine the planets, the solar systems, the galaxies, right? And just how vast it is. And then just imagine all of the detail I was mentioning in something so small, one rose petal or one leaf on a tree, and the detail in each particular one. And that's what Sultan Pasha's Attars feel like to me. Feels like it's so tightly dense, like the core of a planet. You just can't see inside of it. Although you really want to, because it's such a beautiful smell. And yet, when your nose finally picks up on what you're smelling. So for example, as this fragrance dries, it goes into the heart, it turns slightly more ambery and heavier. So it actually becomes stronger, it strengthens, okay? So as it continues to dry on your skin, let's say 1 to 2 hours in, this fragrance becomes stronger. And what ends up happening is there's 2 absolutes that were used in the heart. Rose centrifolia absolute and what Sultan Pasha calls, Edwardian rose absolute, okay? And I think Edwardian rose absolute, if I'm not mistaken, is the same thing as bourbon rose. I think they're the same thing, is my guess. And so the absolute is usually heavier, denser, thicker, richer, darker in color normally. So when if you're imagining a color in the opening, imagine like a light pink to maybe like fuchsia color. That's what the fragrance feels like. Actually, fuchsia is a good color. Imagine this fuchsia like color when it first opens up with the all natural rose otto. And then as those absolutes come in, it almost feels deeper and darker, and the fragrance turns redder. It turns heavier and redder in my mind. And it's like whenever you get one of those, whenever you really can wrap your head around one of those notes, it's a treat. It's beautiful as a fragrance lover. It really is a beautiful thing. And it's completely different from fine French perfumery. They're two totally different worlds. I mean, just like imagine the history of the Arabian Peninsula, imagine the history of Europe, imagine the history of North America, and just think about how those worlds were. Imagine the history of China, just imagine how different each one of the histories were. And that's what this feels like. I mean, this feels like perfume from another planet to me. It just is so different from what I'm used to, so completely different. But I've really enjoyed sort of getting to know it, and it's something that I've been wanting to talk about on the channel. The problem is, I have no clue how to describe what I'm smelling. I mean, I think I'm doing an okay job, but I'm pretty sure you guys still have no idea what this smells like because it's such a hard, this sort of natural smell is almost harder, I think, to describe than what some of these houses are calling things. So let's say Guerlain releases a fragrance called Honey Tobacco Honey, which they have released one, and I think it's like $460, which is crazy. But let's just say that tobacco honey is filled with this common woody-like molecule, or this common honey molecule that is, I don't know, I've never smelled it, but let's just say that it is, right? Well, it's almost easier to discuss, something that the fragrance houses are repeating over and over again than something like this. Something like this is almost harder for me to describe to you guys because we complain so much about not having enough natural materials, and then you get it and you're like, what is this? I mean, and you know what's crazy is the fragrance, while if you go back to that train analogy, right? You're on the train, you're watching the materials go by, but it's almost like you have a pause button. You've got a DVR and you can just hit stop, and I can smell the depth of the rose absolute. I can smell the tobacco in the base, right? I can smell a little bit of that animalic hyraceum. I can smell each individual rose petal. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful experience. It's just so unlike what I'm used to. It's so different. It's literally from another planet. And so, for me, the depth of this experience is a beautiful thing. The other thing I should mention is the jasmine does play a bigger part into the heart of the fragrance. I did not mention the jasmine. There's two beautiful jasmines that actually blend with the honey. So what ends up happening is that the honey in here almost reminds me of, imagine pouring honey into the tea like we were talking about earlier. There actually is a black tea note in the base if you go back to the beginning. Can't believe I've been rambling for 35 minutes. But there is a black tea note in the base, okay? And that black tea note, I don't really get ever. I don't get much of a black tea accord. But the honeyed aspect reminds me of honey that you pour into tea, okay? So while there's a tea-like tint to the smell of the rose, if that makes sense. So the rose smell comes across as having a tea-like tint. I never get like a true, like this never comes across as a tea fragrance to me. But maybe it's because my nose is just so focused on the all-natural rose and jasmine that I'm smelling that I'm discounting some of the base notes, because the base notes are heavy. Like, listen to the base notes again: beeswax, patchouli, benzoin, black tea, deer musk, which he said deer musk accord. So maybe it's not natural deer musk. I honestly don't know. I thought he used natural stuff, but maybe this is just an accord. Gaiac wood, hyraceum, Mysore sandalwood, cedarwood tobacco, vetiver, and white ambergris. Okay, that's according to Parfumo. And that's a heavy base. You think about that. Beeswax can be slightly animalic, but it doesn't wear heavy. You know, that's the thing. 5-6 hours in, as I was saying, you start to get some of those heavier ingredients, but it just feels like, you know, it feels like something that's propping up all of those floral notes from earlier. So you will get, as the fragrance dries, a little bit of the beeswax and the patchouli, and the black tea is blended into that. And so that's why you don't get like a in-your-face tea accord. It's almost more subtle. It's almost like the tea is at the heart of that roundly tightened ball I was talking about earlier. And you're just, you know, you really have to drill, like drilling into the core of the earth to get to the black tea note. And when you get it, it's almost like, I think I got a tea accord. But it smells like it's like a tea note that's coming from the rose, if that makes sense. Like, it's a very complex, very, very hard to break down. It's a very restricted fragrance. The notes sometimes restrict themselves, and then when they show themselves to you, they show themselves with such depth and clarity that you're like, what am I smelling here? You know, but it's so, for somebody who really wants to dive into Attars and natural perfumery, my opinion, pass on the Amouages, although I will review all this stuff. Pass on the Henri Jacques perfumes, although I will review this stuff, and go for Sultan Pasha, in my opinion. And the fact that he gifted these to me means absolutely nothing. In fact, I would go even a step further. I've been bashing Amouage about what they've been coming out with lately. I think Amouage needs to hire Sultan Pasha to make a perfume for them, honestly. Like, if they want to get some damn credibility back, they need to hire somebody like Sultan Pasha to make an Amouage, and let him make a proper Amouage. Don't tell him what to do. Let him be the creative director to make an Amouage the way that he would see fit. Because he probably loves Amouage more than the creative director at Amouage right now loves Amouage. That's my personal opinion. And I know there were 2 or 3 houses that I've heard him say before that he would love to make a fragrance for. One was Guerlain, which I think Guerlain should also let him make one. And one was Amouage. And I think instead of doing all this bullshit, exceptional extra this and double, triple the price that, they should bring on somebody like him and give him a year or two, right? Don't rush him. Give him a couple years. Let him make a proper Amouage fragrance that the Sultan, the late great Sultan of Oman, would be proud of. That's how far I would go with how much respect I have for Sultan Pasha. You know, him and Russian Adam, the fact that they were friends and knew each other in London before either of them kind of blew up, crazy. I would love to have him on the channel. I think he's a very interesting guy, and I think people like him and Russian Adam are kind of, you know, I always say I'm the guy that likes to go against the stream. What's interesting about them is they are going against the stream. They're going straight against the stream. And it really shows. It shows in their fragrances. Now, that being said, that doesn't mean that I don't like some of these, some of these Guerlains and YSLs and all of that stuff. And some of these old Amouages, I love that style of perfumery. I'm just a little disenfranchised with the new stuff, right? And this last year has been a year of discovery for me. And mostly what I've been discovering is the artisanal houses. So I've been doing a lot of videos on stuff like Prin, which is not my favorite artisanal house. Arise Ladore is. Bortnikov, these type of artisanal houses. And I think that it's safe to add Sultan Pasha to that list. I would not add Henri Jacques, even though these are very expensive. Attars, they call them. I would not add them. I would not add a brand like Henri Jacques to the list. But Sultan Pasha's work, yes. And I absolutely love the wax. I think that's an amazing touch. I love the presentation. I think that's perfect. So I mean, he can really be proud of some of the stuff that he's made from what I've smelled so far. And I can't wait to talk about more. I wish I could say I felt like I did this fragrance justice, but I honestly don't feel like I did, but I don't think I ever would. So it was either do it like this and just ramble about it for 45 minutes, or don't do it at all. Because honestly, they would just sit there. Like these Henri Jacques fragrances have been sitting here for over a year, and I've never done videos on them just because these Attars they're just not my thing, right? I'm going to try to force myself to do more of these videos. But, when you look up Sultan Pasha, maybe there's like a video of someone and they'll say Sultan Pasha and they'll talk about like 20 fragrances in 10 minutes or 15 minutes. It's impossible. With how deep these fragrances are, that is impossible. Each one of these deserves its own video. It deserves to be discussed more. I wish I could go into more detail on the scent, but like I said, I honestly don't feel like I have the vocabulary. I hope you guys have enjoyed listening to me ramble about the way the fragrance breaks down and how I feel about Attars and the brands and all that stuff. This is a very uplifting. This puts you in a very good spirit. This is the type of fragrance that's very relaxing, very zen-like, very wusa, very zen, Everything is perfect in life. Honestly, if you feel that way, your life will start to, it's like that, putting that energy out into the universe. There is something about that, I truly believe. So if you have experience with Shirin Chai by any chance, I would love to hear your thoughts. Or if you just have experience with the house of Sultan Pasha in general, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Appreciate everybody watching and commenting and all the things that you guys do. Look forward to seeing you in the comments. Cheers, and I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.